All right, week 3, 2.7 and 2.8. We are talking about more problem solving with word problems, and we're going to get into inequalities. This is information we talked about in week 2, the steps to do problem solving. Here is the condensed version. So those of you who like the bullet points better, I have those as well. So some of the helpful hints, okay? So step 1, find the important information, know what you're trying to find. Step 2, draw a picture if it is something that you are able to draw a picture for. Step 3, pick an equation. Step 4, solve the problem, so solve for the variable or the unknown. Step 5, double check your answer, make sure you're right. Here's a quick example. There's a lot of these in week 2. So if you need more examples, go to week 2 and follow along that video. But while swimming in the ocean, Missy's sunglasses fell off her head. If the sunglasses fall at a rate of 4 feet per second, how long will it take for them to fall 70 feet? I know distance and I know the rate, but I'm looking for the time. So I'm going to use the equation of d equals t times r. So I'm going to let t equals the time, which that's when it's asking how long in the blue. That is obviously asking for a time. So I'm going to use d equals r times t, and I'm going to plug in. I know that they were 70 feet, and they were falling 4 feet per second. This is a one-step equation, so I divide by 4, and then I get my answer. So I solve it. I divide by 4, and I get 17.5. Now when we go to step 4, that's interpreting. That means you have to label it. I don't know what 17.5 is. It could be candy, it could be inches, it could be feet, it could be anything. So the last step is making sure you label. I don't expect you to write a whole sentence every time, but you need to at least tell me what it is. So Missy's sunglasses fell 17.5 seconds. You could just put t equals 17.5 s or t equals 17.5 seconds, as long as I know what that is. I double check my answer. It comes out to 70. I know I'm correct. Inequalities. Now before I jump into this, remember you can go back into week 2 and get more examples of word problems. Inequalities are very similar to what we've been doing. There's just one major change. Instead of having an equal sign, so an equation, inequalities give you a little bit of a range. It tells you greater than or equal to, or greater than or equal to. When we are graphing these, this is the most important. Number 1, you need to make sure you have a number line. Number 2, if it is a less than or greater than, so no equal to, just less than or equal greater than, so it's just the alligator mouth, then you will use a parentheses. If it is an equal to, so there's a line below the alligator mouth, then you'll use a bracket. For example, this one is x is less than or equal to 7. As you notice, in between x and 7, there is a alligator mouth with the line. So that means less than or equal to. I put a bracket, my arrow points to the direction I need to go, and then you're good. This one is just an x is greater than 4. There is no equal to, so it's just the alligator mouth. So I put a parentheses and then draw an arrow. When you are adding, so this is just a good rule that all inequalities will follow. So when you're using real numbers, so that's positive or negative numbers, A is always going to be less than B, which means if you have A plus B, it will always be less than B plus C. It doesn't matter what numbers you throw in there, that will always be true. Here's an example of how to solve. So this is very, very similar to what we've been working on, but there's one change, and that all it has is its graphing. So this is a one-step equation. Remember, there's one step to get the variable by itself. I would add 6 on both sides, and I get x is greater than or less than negative 5. Because it's greater than or equal to, that means I use a bracket, and my number is infinity to the right because it's greater than negative 5, so it can be any number greater than 5. So I'm going to have my number line. I put my bracket, because it's an equal to, on the 5. That means I can hit 5 or do anything above 5, so I draw my arrow and I'm complete. When we are multiplying, whenever you multiply or you have A and B like before, if you multiply A times C and then B times C, it still comes the same. Only when you are dividing by a negative number does things change, and that's basically what this is saying. So here's an example of that. So I have my problem. I see that it is a negative 3. This is only when there's a negative tied to the variable. So it's a negative multiplied by the variable does this change. So I'm going to divide by negative 3 on both sides just like I'm used to. But if you notice in the middle of the problem, I flip my inequality. So instead of x being less than or equal to, it is going to be greater than or equal to my solution. This is the one and only time. Only when you divide by a negative number after being multiplied by the variable. So from this, I know that because it's an equal to, it's a bracket. I put my bracket on negative 4 and I draw my arrow to the right because x is greater than or equal to negative 4. So that means I cannot get smaller than negative 4, but I can hit negative 4. That was a lot of negative 4's in there. All right, compound inequalities. So this is the next step. This is when you have two numbers with two inequalities and your variable is in the middle. Okay, so there contains two symbols. So in these symbols, when I'm solving the inequality, I have to make sure that my equation stays balanced all the time, which means you have to do the math on the left and right side of each equation. So in this problem, if I was to solve, I would add 5 on both sides, subtract 5 on both sides. Because it's a plus 5, you do a minus 5. I do the math, z is left in the middle, and I have z is greater than 4, but is less than 8. That's how I would read it. Or you could say 4 is less than z, but z is less than 8. You can read it any way. So I take my 2 and I know my bracket. So I'm going to start with a 4 and I'm going to end on an 8. I can't go anywhere in those because they're just greater than or less than, no equal to's. I use parentheses and I must draw a line in the middle connecting my parentheses. So that tells me anywhere on that purple line could be the number or the letter Z. So whatever Z represents. I hope this is helpful. If you have any questions, feel free to email me or message me and I'll get back to you as soon as I can.